"Sir, you need to leave the VIP lounge. Right now." The sentence sliced through the quiet hum of the airport lounge so sharply that every conversation seemed to stop at once. Marcus Reed didn't argue. Instead, the 17-year-old black teenager carefully placed a worn brown leather wallet onto the marble reception counter, taking one slow step backward as if protecting the object from being misunderstood. His faded charcoal hoodie looked painfully out of place among tailored suits and polished luggage, yet his hands never trembled. Around him, curious eyes shifted from the wallet to his old backpack, then to the security officer already reaching for his radio. No one seemed interested in the elderly man sitting near the window, watching the entire exchange without blinking. His ebony walking cane rested across his knees, but his attention never lingered on the wallet. It stayed fixed on the weathered silver keychain hanging from Marcus's backpack. The old man's expression barely changed, though his fingers tightened around the cane. "I found it near gate 21, Marcus said quietly. "I thought someone here might be looking for it." The receptionist barely glanced at him before nodding toward the exit. "VIP access only. Security will handle the wallet." Marcus looked at the wallet one final time, as though making sure nothing had shifted inside it, then turned without another word. Most people would have defended themselves. Most would have complained. Marcus simply walked away. That should have been the end of it. Instead, the lounge doors opened again as two airport security officers entered with measured steps. One spoke briefly with the receptionist before pointing directly toward Marcus, who had almost reached the hallway. Several travelers exchanged knowing looks, quietly filling in the blanks with assumptions no one bothered to verify. A teenager in an old hoodie, a luxury lounge, a misplaced wallet. The story practically wrote itself. Across the room, Victoria Bennett lowered the financial report she had been reviewing. The 59-year-old white billionaire rarely interrupted airport staff doing their jobs. Order mattered to her. Procedures existed for a reason. She watched Marcus pause as one officer politely asked him to return to the counter. He complied immediately, neither defensive nor frightened, simply exhausted in a way that made him seem older than 17. Then something unexpected happened. The wallet was opened in front of everyone. Cash remained untouched. Credit cards were neatly stacked. Identification was exactly where it belonged. Yet the owner's face turned pale. "Something's missing," he whispered. The room grew even quieter. Security officers exchanged glances before looking back at Marcus. Victoria's posture stiffened. The elderly man near the window did not react to the missing item. Instead, his eyes narrowed at the scratched silver keychain dangling from Marcus's backpack. He leaned forward almost imperceptibly, as though trying to confirm something impossible. For the first time since the confrontation began, he slowly rose to his feet, gripping the ebony cane with one hand while staring at the tiny engraved emblem on the old keychain. And under his breath, barely loud enough for anyone to hear, he murmured, "That can't be." Marcus did not pull away when the security officer asked for his identification. He quietly handed over his state identification card, keeping his eyes on the leather wallet instead of the growing circle of strangers surrounding him. The owner searched every compartment again, his breathing becoming shorter with each passing second before shaking his head. "A small access card was inside," he said. "It is not valuable to anyone else, but I need it." Those words landed harder than the missing cash ever could have. One officer glanced toward Marcus. "You were the last person holding the wallet?" Marcus nodded once. "I picked it up off the floor near gate 21. "Did you open it?" "Only enough to see if there was an identification card." The answer sounded calm, but it only seemed to confirm what everyone was already beginning to believe. Victoria Bennett watched the exchange without interrupting. Every response Marcus gave was measured, respectful, and almost painfully brief. Yet experience had taught her that appearances alone settled nothing. Rules existed because facts mattered more than impressions. She folded her report and remained silent, allowing security to continue. Meanwhile, Harold Whitmore slowly returned to his chair instead of speaking up. His eyes drifted once more to the battered silver keychain swinging gently from Marcus's backpack whenever he shifted his weight. It was an ordinary object to everyone else, scratched by years of use, attached with an inexpensive metal ring. Yet Harold studied it with the concentration of someone trying to remember a forgotten face. Before anyone noticed, he reached into the inside pocket of his sport coat and quietly touched a small leather notebook, his expression tightening for only a heartbeat. Across the terminal, another announcement echoed overhead as boarding groups changed. Marcus was finally asked to wait outside the lounge while officers completed their report. He accepted without protest and stepped into the main concourse. Instead of disappearing into the crowd, he stopped beside a worried couple struggling with 2 young children and 3 oversized suitcases. One little girl stood crying beside a luggage carousel that had already stopped moving. Marcus crouched beside her, pointed toward the airline service counter nearly 40 feet away, and offered to carry the family's heaviest suitcase while her parents searched for assistance. Several travelers noticed him helping, but inside the lounge, security cameras only captured fragments of his movements as he crossed between the concourse and nearby service desks. Minutes later, one officer reviewing the footage frowned. "He has been moving back and forth around this terminal for almost 20 minutes, she said. "He keeps appearing near restricted entrances." Victoria leaned closer to the monitor, watching Marcus reappear in different camera angles. Without context, the pattern looked suspicious. With context, she could not yet tell. At that exact moment, Harold suddenly looked up from his chair, his eyes widening as though another memory had surfaced. He gripped his ebony cane, stared toward Marcus through the glass wall, and whispered, "Why would he still be carrying that after all these years?" Victoria Bennett stepped away from the lounge window and approached the security desk herself, her cream-colored suit standing out against the polished stone floor. She did not raise her voice or flash her reputation. She simply extended her boarding pass. "Show me the timeline," she said. One of the officers hesitated for only a moment before turning the monitor toward her. Camera feeds rolled across the screen. Marcus appeared near Gate 21. Minutes later, he crossed the concourse carrying the leather wallet. Then another camera caught him speaking briefly with an airport employee before walking toward the VIP entrance. Another angle showed him leaving again. The sequence looked orderly, almost rehearsed. Victoria watched every second twice. "Do we have footage from inside Gate 21? She asked. "Not yet," the officer replied. "Those cameras are managed by another terminal. We are requesting them." It was not enough. The missing minutes between the recordings felt larger than everything they could already see. Outside the lounge, Marcus returned after helping the family retrieve their luggage. The little girl waved before disappearing toward another gate. Marcus offered a small smile in return, then quietly took a seat exactly where security had instructed him to wait. He never checked his phone. He never looked toward the exit. He simply rested both hands on his old backpack, the scratched silver keychain catching the afternoon sunlight each time it swung against the faded fabric. Harold could not take his eyes off it. At last, he slowly crossed the room with measured steps, stopping only a few feet from Marcus. "Young man," he asked gently, "where did you get that keychain?" Marcus looked up, surprised by the question. "It belonged to my father." Harold's fingers tightened around the ebony cane. "Did he ever tell you where it came from?" Marcus shook his head. "He passed away when I was 12. My mother said he carried it everywhere, so I kept it." Before Harold could ask another question, one of the officers interrupted. "Sir, please give us a moment." Harold nodded politely and stepped back without protest, but the question remained hanging in the air. Victoria had heard every word. She studied Harold's face instead of Marcus's. Whatever had just happened, it had shaken the retired judge far more than the missing access card. Moments later, another airport employee hurried into the lounge carrying a printed report. "We checked the owner again," she said. "The access card was definitely inside when he entered the airport this morning." The officer placed the report beside the wallet. Then it disappeared sometime after he arrived. Every eye drifted back toward Marcus. The silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation. Victoria slowly closed the report and made her decision. "Continue the investigation," she said calmly. "No shortcuts. No assumptions. I want every camera angle reviewed before anyone reaches a conclusion." As security nodded, Harold quietly slipped his hand into his coat pocket once more. His fingertips brushed the worn leather notebook, and for the first time his expression changed from uncertainty to alarm, as though he had suddenly remembered something that he desperately hoped was not true. The atmosphere inside the lounge shifted from quiet concern to controlled urgency as another security specialist arrived carrying a portable fingerprint scanner. Without raising his voice, he asked the wallet owner to identify every compartment that had contained the missing access card. The man pointed to a narrow inner sleeve lined with dark leather. A technician carefully dusted the opening before lifting a strip of transparent film into the light. Several partial fingerprints appeared almost immediately. One officer compared them with the prints Marcus had voluntarily provided only minutes earlier. The room remained silent until the result appeared on the screen. There is a match. No one said the words Marcus feared most, yet the reaction around him changed instantly. Curious glances hardened into certainty. The owner of the wallet lowered his eyes. One traveler quietly shook his head. Another whispered something to a companion before turning away. Marcus looked at the scanner, then at his own hands, as though trying to understand how a simple act of returning lost property had carried him into this moment. He did not protest. He only answered the next question exactly as it was asked. Yes, I opened that compartment while looking for identification. The explanation was truthful, but inside the growing silence it sounded painfully incomplete. Victoria watched the faces around the room rather than the evidence itself. She recognized something familiar. Once people believed they understood a story, every new detail seemed to strengthen the same conclusion. She folded her arms but did not interfere. Facts still mattered, and the investigation was no longer simple. Harold remained motionless near the window, gripping his ebony cane so firmly that his knuckles whitened. His eyes drifted toward Marcus's backpack again before settling on the worn silver keychain. Whatever troubled him had nothing to do with fingerprints, yet he still refused to speak. Outside the glass wall, another boarding announcement echoed through the terminal as passengers hurried toward their gates. Time was beginning to run out for everyone. A security supervisor stepped forward with a measured tone. Marcus, until we locate the missing access card, we need you to remain available for additional questioning. Marcus nodded. I understand. There was no anger in his voice, only quiet acceptance that somehow made the moment even heavier. As an officer picked up the wallet once more, something unexpected caught his attention. The leather lining inside the inner sleeve had separated slightly along one edge, revealing a thin gap beneath the stitching. He pressed it gently with a pen. A faint clicking sound came from somewhere inside the wallet, but nothing emerged. The officer frowned and examined it again before shaking his head. Probably just worn leather, he muttered, placing the wallet back on the counter. Harold's eyes widened for a fraction of a second at the sound, but before he could move, another officer received a call through his earpiece. His expression changed immediately. He turned toward Victoria and the security supervisor. The management office wants this resolved before boarding begins. If we do not recover that access card within the next 30 minutes, airport police will take over. The words settled over the lounge like a closing door. Marcus quietly tightened his grip on the straps of his old backpack, while Harold stared not at the wallet, but at the silver keychain once again, as if both objects were somehow connected in a way only he could see. The airport police had not yet arrived, but their presence already filled the room like an approaching storm. No one spoke above a whisper anymore. Marcus remained exactly where security had asked him to wait, his backpack resting against his leg, the scratched silver keychain reflecting brief flashes of light each time travelers hurried past the lounge entrance. Harold Whitmore finally took another slow step toward him. May I see the keychain? He asked. Marcus hesitated for only a second before unclipping it from the zipper and placing it into the older man's open palm. Harold turned it over carefully. Years of scratches covered the dull silver surface, but beneath the worn metal he found the tiny engraved crest he had been searching for. His breathing caught. He traced the emblem with his thumb before looking back at Marcus. Your father never told you where this came from? Marcus quietly shook his head, only that it reminded him to do the right thing, even when nobody noticed. Harold lowered his eyes. Something inside him seemed to shift, but instead of explaining, he slowly handed the keychain back. Across the room, Victoria noticed the exchange immediately. The old judge had ignored nearly every question about the missing access card, yet this inexpensive piece of metal held his complete attention. She walked over before either man could leave. Mr. Whitmore, she said calmly, you recognize that keychain. Harold looked at her for a long moment. I recognize what it represents. It was not the answer she expected. Before she could ask another question, one of the technicians returned carrying the wallet again. We examined the damaged lining, he reported. There is an empty space beneath the leather. Something thin could fit inside, but we cannot see far enough without damaging the wallet. The owner immediately objected. Do not cut it open. It is handmade. Security reluctantly agreed to preserve it until airport police could authorize further inspection. Victoria watched the technician place the wallet back onto the counter. The faint clicking sound echoed once more as it touched the marble surface. Harold's eyes closed briefly. His face revealed neither relief nor fear, only recognition. The sound meant something to him. Marcus noticed it too. You have heard that before, he said quietly. Harold did not answer. Instead, he looked at Marcus with an expression that carried both sorrow and admiration. Your father was the kind of man who returned things even when no one was watching, he murmured. The words froze everyone nearby. Marcus stared at him, surprised that a stranger could speak so confidently about a man he had lost 5 years earlier. Victoria's attention shifted instantly from the wallet to Harold. This was no coincidence anymore. Before anyone could press him further, an airline supervisor hurried into the lounge holding a tablet. We found another camera angle, she announced. It confirms Marcus carried the wallet exactly as he described. Relief flickered across Marcus's face for the first time all afternoon, but it vanished almost instantly when the supervisor continued. However, the missing access card still does not appear after he opened it. According to the footage, it was already gone. The room fell silent. Every assumption that had driven the investigation suddenly cracked, yet nothing explained where the card had disappeared. Harold slowly reached inside his sport coat and rested his trembling hand on the small leather notebook hidden there, his expression turning pale as though an impossible memory had finally begun forcing its way back. Harold's trembling hand remained inside his sport coat, resting against the small leather notebook as though removing it might change everything. Before he could speak, 2 airport police officers entered the lounge with calm, practiced expressions. The room instinctively parted to make space for them. One officer accepted the investigation file from airport security while the other looked toward Marcus. Until we finish reviewing the evidence, we need you to come with us. Marcus slowly rose from his chair. He glanced once toward the family he had helped earlier. They were already gone. There was no familiar face left in the terminal, only strangers watching him become the center of a story they believed they already understood. He slipped his backpack over one shoulder without complaint. The scratched silver keychain clicked softly against the zipper, drawing Harold's attention again. Victoria stepped forward before Marcus reached the exit. Has every available camera been reviewed? She asked. The supervising officer answered honestly. Not every angle. But we have enough to continue the investigation, and boarding deadlines leave us little choice. Victoria looked at Marcus for a long moment. She still had no evidence proving his innocence, yet the quiet dignity with which he accepted every accusation unsettled her more than any missing card. Treat him with respect, she said firmly. Until facts say otherwise, he is cooperating voluntarily. The officers nodded. Marcus thanked her with a slight movement of his head before continuing toward the door. Harold suddenly stood so quickly that the rubber tip of his ebony cane scraped sharply across the polished floor. Every conversation stopped. He looked at Marcus, then at the leather notebook hidden inside his coat, his breathing uneven as though 2 memories were colliding inside his mind. His lips parted, but no words came. Instead, he closed his eyes for a brief second and lowered the cane again. The silence felt heavier than any accusation spoken aloud. At the security counter, the handmade wallet was sealed inside a clear evidence pouch. As the technician lifted it, the faint metallic click echoed once more from beneath the damaged lining. This time Marcus heard it clearly. So did Harold. Their eyes met for the briefest instant. Marcus did not understand the sound, but Harold reacted as if it belonged to a forgotten moment from decades earlier. Victoria noticed the exchange immediately. She had spent a lifetime making decisions based on patterns, and now 2 separate mysteries seemed to be moving toward each other. One centered on the hidden space inside the wallet. The other centered on a weathered silver keychain carried by a teenager who had never tried to defend himself. Neither mystery made sense, yet both seemed connected through Harold alone. An airport employee hurried over with an update from the management office. The aircraft has begun final boarding. Airport police will complete the investigation in the secured interview area. The words erased the last possibility that this misunderstanding might quietly disappear. Marcus adjusted the straps of his backpack and walked beside the officers without resistance. Just before he crossed the doorway, Harold reached into his coat at last and pulled the small leather notebook halfway into view. His eyes widened in visible shock. Something thin was tucked between its pages. He stared at it in disbelief, then looked toward Marcus being led away. Before he could open the notebook or say a single word, the interview room door closed behind Marcus with a solid click that echoed through the terminal, leaving Harold frozen in place, clutching the notebook that might already contain the answer everyone had been searching for. The interview room door had barely closed before Harold Whitmore hurried forward with a speed that seemed impossible only moments earlier. "Stop," he called, his voice carrying across the terminal with unexpected strength. Every officer turned. Victoria stepped beside him as Harold carefully opened the worn leather notebook that had remained hidden inside his coat all afternoon. Tucked between two pages rested a thin plastic access card. The owner of the wallet stared in disbelief. One airport police officer immediately reached for an evidence bag, but paused when Harold lifted a trembling hand. "Do not accuse that young man another second," he said quietly. "This card never left my possession." Silence settled over the lounge. Harold looked down at the card as though seeing it for the first time. "I asked the gentleman at the lounge entrance if I could borrow his notebook while I signed a document. I remember placing something inside these pages to keep my hands free." His voice faltered. "I believed I put it back into the wallet. I was wrong." The wallet owner slowly covered his face with both hands, struggling to retrace the afternoon in his own memory. Victoria did not speak. She watched the investigation unravel one careful thread at a time. The evidence that had seemed so certain only minutes before now pointed in an entirely different direction. One officer compared the recovered card with the report. The serial number matched perfectly. Marcus had never possessed it. The missing piece had been sitting inside Harold's notebook all along. Yet Harold's eyes were not fixed on the access card. They remained on Marcus, who had just been escorted back from the interview room after hearing his name called. Confusion crossed the teenager's face as he stepped into the lounge again. Harold slowly approached him, holding the notebook in one hand and the recovered card in the other. "There is something else you deserve to know," he said. He gently asked to see the silver keychain one more time. Marcus unclipped it without hesitation. Harold turned it over until the tiny engraved crest caught the overhead light. A faint smile, filled with both grief and gratitude, appeared for the first time that day. "I gave this to your father more than 20 years ago," he said. Marcus did not answer. He simply stared. Harold continued, his voice unsteady. "I was trapped inside a vehicle after a bridge collapse. Your father was one of the rescue officers who reached me. Before he left the hospital, I handed him this keychain as a simple thank you. He laughed and said he did not need a reward. I told him to keep it anyway, so he would remember that one act of kindness can travel farther than any of us ever will." Marcus's fingers slowly closed around the scratched metal. Everything his mother had ever said about his father suddenly carried a face, a place, and a living witness. Victoria watched the exchange with quiet disbelief. The teenager she had first seen as a subject of an investigation was now standing before the man whose life his father had once saved. The room felt transformed, yet one question still refused to disappear. Harold looked toward the handmade wallet resting inside its evidence pouch. "There is one more mistake that belongs to me," he whispered. "And until we open that damaged lining, none of us will fully understand what really happened today." Every eye turned toward the sealed wallet once again as the supervising officer quietly ordered the evidence pouch brought back to the counter. The evidence pouch was placed back onto the marble counter, and for the first time no one rushed to speak. The supervising officer carefully broke the seal while the wallet owner watched with folded hands, his earlier certainty replaced by quiet embarrassment. A forensic technician slipped a thin inspection tool beneath the separated leather lining and gently lifted it just enough to reveal the narrow hidden space inside. A tiny metal spring, no larger than a paper clip, shifted loose and fell onto the counter with the same faint click everyone had heard throughout the afternoon. The technician smiled with relief. "This is a concealed retaining clip," she explained softly. When it slipped out of place, the inner sleeve opened just enough to create the impression that something had been removed. The wallet owner stared at the damaged compartment, then slowly closed his eyes. "The card must have slipped out when I handed Harold the notebook to steady my papers," he whispered. Marcus never had the chance to take it. Airport police immediately updated the report, replacing suspicion with verified facts. One officer walked directly to Marcus and returned the identification card he had surrendered hours earlier. "Thank you for your patience," he said simply. Marcus accepted it with the same calm expression he had carried since the beginning, offering only a quiet, "Thank you, officer." There was no celebration in his voice, only relief that the truth no longer had to fight alone. Victoria stepped toward him next. She looked briefly at the officers, then at the travelers who had silently judged the young man before turning her full attention to Marcus. Without announcing who she was or expecting recognition, she extended her hand. "I should have trusted what I saw in your actions as much as I trusted the procedure," she said. Marcus shook her hand politely. "You wanted the facts," he replied. "So did I." The answer lingered in the air longer than either expected. Nearby, several passengers quietly approached Marcus one by one. A businessman who had avoided eye contact earlier offered an awkward apology. The wallet owner apologized next, his voice breaking as he thanked Marcus for returning something that many people would have ignored. Marcus accepted every apology with a small nod before glancing through the glass wall toward the concourse. The family he had helped earlier was struggling once again, this time with a stroller that had become stuck beside an automatic door. Without waiting for another conversation, Marcus excused himself and walked out to help them. Victoria watched him disappear into the crowd instead of remaining to receive praise. Harold smiled faintly as the silver keychain swung against Marcus's backpack, catching one final beam of afternoon sunlight. "His father would have done exactly the same thing," he murmured. Victoria looked at Harold with quiet understanding, then reached into her briefcase and removed a simple white business card. She did not call Marcus back immediately. Instead, she waited until he finished helping the family and watched him return with the same unhurried dignity that had marked every choice he had made that day. As Marcus approached the lounge once more, Victoria took a slow breath, stepped forward, and raised the card in her hand, preparing to make an offer that would reach far beyond a single afternoon at the airport. Marcus returned after helping the young family through the automatic doors, brushing a few drops of rain from the sleeve of his faded charcoal hoodie before stepping quietly back toward the lounge. Victoria Bennett was waiting exactly where he had left her, the white business card still resting between her fingers. She did not offer it immediately. Instead, she looked at the teenager who had spent the longest afternoon of his life helping strangers who had never once been responsible for what had happened to him. "You have every reason to walk away," she said softly. Marcus glanced toward the runway beyond the glass walls where aircraft lights shimmered against the wet pavement. "Walking away would not change today," he replied. "But maybe what happens after today can." Victoria nodded as though hearing the answer she had hoped existed but could never have predicted. She finally handed him the card. It was not an invitation to charity, nor a reward for suffering. It was an invitation to spend the summer working with a new youth leadership initiative her foundation was preparing for students who had shown uncommon integrity under pressure. "No promises," she added. "Just an opportunity to earn whatever comes next." Marcus accepted the card carefully, sliding it into the same backpack that carried the weathered silver keychain his father had once received. Harold Whitmore watched with quiet satisfaction before taking one slow step closer. From the pocket of his jacket, he removed a small velvet pouch. Inside rested a polished replacement ring for the old keychain, handcrafted after the original had worn thin over the years. "Your father once told me that gratitude should never become a burden," Harold said. "So I waited until today to give you this." Marcus clipped the stronger ring onto the scratched silver emblem without replacing the emblem itself. The old metal remained scarred, but now it would not fall away. Airport police formally closed the report, and the wallet owner asked if Marcus would allow him to buy dinner before their flights. Marcus smiled gratefully but declined, explaining that his mother was expecting him home that evening. Before leaving, the man quietly made a donation to the youth program Victoria had described, saying only that he wanted something good to grow from a mistake he would never forget. Months later, photographs lined the entrance of the foundation's first leadership workshop. Among them was one taken without Marcus noticing. It showed him kneeling beside the frightened little girl at the luggage carousel long before anyone knew he had been innocent. Victoria insisted that image remain at the entrance because it captured the moment that had changed her more than any investigation ever could. Harold occasionally visited the program, always carrying his ebony cane, always smiling whenever he saw the familiar silver keychain swinging from Marcus's backpack as he welcomed new students. The airport eventually became only a memory, but the choices made there continued to ripple quietly through lives that had once crossed for only a single afternoon. And every time the worn silver keychain caught the light, it reflected the simple truth that kindness can disappear inside suspicion for a while, yet it always finds its way back into the open.